Hello, welcome to my book report. I'm going to be talking about Luster by Raven Leilani. This book has had a lot of buzz recently. It won the 2020 Kirkus Prize for Fiction. It's been getting a lot of very nice laudatory reviews, so I thought I would discuss whether or not I think it's worth the hype. Let's start with a quick plot synopsis. This book is about Edie, a 23-year-old woman living in New York City, working in the publishing industry. She's not making very much money. She's not feeling very successful or anything like that. She starts dating this guy named Eric, who is in his 40s and married. He is in a recently open relationship, but there's a lot of rules about it. And very quickly in the start of the book, Edie loses her job and is evicted from her apartment, and Rebecca, Eric's wife, offers for her to stay with them. So it's a mess. Also, Edie is black, this couple is white, and they have an adopted black daughter named Akila, and that dynamic is very strange. It seems to be one of the reasons that Rebecca wants Edie to live with them is that she's not doing a very good job of raising her daughter. She doesn't really know how to relate to her. There are no black people in their neighborhood. She doesn't know how to do her hair, all this stuff. And so basically it's about a couple using this woman. And also this woman making a lot of bad early 20s decisions, but like even worse than most people's bad early 20s type decisions. Not that I don't have sympathy for her. She literally has nowhere to go when this book starts. She has no friends. Her parents are dead. It's all just a mess. Now, all of that said, this is not a very plot-driven book. There is a lot happening. It's not plotless, but plot is not the thing that keeps you reading. What keeps you reading is Raven Leilani's absolutely amazing writing style. And that's what you either are going to love or hate about this book. If you look at the Goodreads reviews, all the one-star reviews are people saying that the writing style is pretentious, and all the five-star reviews are people saying that it's amazing. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really wanted to give it 5, but I felt like there were a lot of plot elements that were just sort of contrived, or at least a little bit contrived. I can see why Edie does what she does, even though a lot of her decisions are really bad, because she's very well characterized, and I can understand why she makes the choices she makes. But Rebecca does a lot of weird stuff I don't understand, and it just feels like I have to suspend my disbelief a little more often than I would like. And this book has a really weird relationship with reality, where it is at once very realistic in like a slice of life way, but it's also not. I will explain what I mean by that. But first I want to read a few passages to give you an idea of the writing style, because like I said, if you don't like it, don't read the book. And if you do, read it. It's really that simple. Okay. This is a passage from very early on. Eric and Edie are on their first date, and they are at Six Flags. We decide to go on a Tuesday. When he rolls up in his white Volvo, I have only made it to the part of my pre-date routine where I try to find the most appropriate laugh. I put on 3 dresses before I find the right one. I tie up my braids and line my eyes. There are dishes in the sink and a pervasive salmon smell in the apartment, and I don't want him to think it has anything to do with me. I put on a complex pair of underwear. That is not so much underwear as a bundle of string, and I stand before the mirror. I think to myself, you are a desirable woman. You are not a dozen gerbils in a skin casing. Okay, so that's a pretty weird description, but she had me at a dozen gerbils in a skin casing. She either has you or she doesn't. Okay, one more moment that I wanted to read. Of course, there is still the business of trying to look sexy while hurtling across the sky. Like most white people who eat beans in the woods, undeterred by the fresh fecal evidence of hungry bears, Eric finds his mortality and soft, meaty body a petty, incidental thing. I, on the other hand, am acutely aware of all the ways I might die. So when the sighing teenage park associate slaps my harness down and slogs over to the levers, I think of all my unfinished business. The quart of pistachio gelato in my freezer, the 1.5 wanks left in my half-dead vibrator, my Mr. Rogers box set. Eric's enthusiasm is infectious. After the first 2 rides, I'm enjoying myself, and not just because dying means I won't have to pay off my student loans. Okay? I think it's funny. It's clearly supposed to be funny, and if you don't think it's funny, then you probably shouldn't bother reading it. Like I said, the people who don't like this writing style say that it's because it feels pretentious, which I do understand, but I actually thought it was pretty accessible. I mean, yes, there are some long sentences, but I've seen longer sentences, and I did have to look up 5 or 6 words, which was easy because I was reading it on the Kindle before I decided it was so good I should buy a copy, but I don't want to punish Raven Leilani for being smarter than me. I didn't feel like it was thesaurus style writing. I feel like she just knew some words that I didn't know, and I got to learn them, and that was cool. But I do understand why, if something feels pretentious or it's going over your head, it's just not fun to read, and I respect that. Now we have to talk about a trend in literature that I think that this book falls into, which is books about unhappy young women in rote, thankless jobs. These are usually written in the first person, and often have unlikable narrators. There was an article written in the Baffler about this called "I'm Not Feeling Well at All, The Perplexingly Alienated Women of Recent American Fiction." And I like these books. I like these books a lot. So some examples include The New Me by Hallie Butler, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Atessa Moshfegh, I would argue Luster, and Severance by Ling Ma, just to name some. I also don't think it's like rocket science to think about why are there so many books being written today about young women who are unhappy and underpaid? Well, probably because there are a lot of young women who are unhappy and underpaid. Like, it's not... Wonder what's going on there. What's happening in the United States right now? Capitalism. So, I don't think it's like a crazy bonkers trend, and I don't think people are hopping on a trend. I'm not accusing Raven Leilani of sitting around being like, how do I capitalize on this trend? She probably just has student loans and understands what that is like and what it's like to be young and maybe make some regrettable decisions. But anyways, I do think this book sort of falls into that category, even though I don't think that Edie is a really unlikable narrator. Sometimes you really want to shake her because she makes some like really bad choices, and yeah, a lot of the stuff she does is really questionable, which is the case for everyone in this book except for poor Aquila, who's like fine and just undeserving of this situation that she's in. But yeah, I don't think Edie's unlikable. I actually found her pretty relatable, other than the fact that she does like yeah, like I said, without ruining any plot, don't want to be specific, but she does make a lot of really questionable decisions that are less relatable. So I also want to read a quote from that article that I think is interesting. Again, Luster was not part of the list of books in that article because this article was written in March, and I don't even know if Luster was published yet. But anyways, it's not about Luster, but I would say that Luster fits into this category. And that author writes, "However individually stylish or inventive, taken together, the novels tend to replicate the sensations of apathy and tedium they describe." I don't think this book is boring, but that's an interesting point. "This may be intentional, but the outcome is more or less the same one would observe 20 years ago. Fiction that depicts people who are not really alive, not fully human, whose style seems evasive of reality while borrowing from realism itself." Ooh, the reality part is what I wanted to talk about. Because on the one hand, this feels like a really slice of life, daily, everyday reality book. But that reality is really exaggerated for comedic effect a lot of the time and veers into completely unbelievable. So I think this has a really interesting relationship with reality. So I was going to read a passage that I think really exemplifies that. "This is sexually explicit, just so you know. One of the benefits of not being a monetized YouTube channel is you can't get demonetized because you don't make any money either way. My love, this is the problem with your generation. Instant gratification," he says. "And because it took him on average 43 minutes to come, because I put on the ears and the tail and learned the lyrics to Painting the Roses Red backward and forward, because I drank approximately 5 gallons of cranberry juice over the course of our relationship and for a day or two required the use of a cane, I take issue with his definition of instant." So I think that's really funny, and I like the generational critique. But like, what in the world is happening here? I know some people are weird, but Alice in Wonderland lyrics, I don't really understand. So I think this book, like I said, has a weird relationship with reality, where there's moments where you really feel like this is very slice of life, daily stuff, and other times you kind of have no idea what she's talking about, but still I find it really entertaining and funny. So I think if if you feel that way, like you're willing to just kind of like be in the reality of this book, it's fun. But if you take issue with that, then you're gonna not be having a very good time reading it. So I don't want to lump Luster in together with all those other books because they're all different. And I think there's some real ways in which Luster goes in its own direction. Like I said, I don't think the narrator is nearly as unlikable as some of these other narrators. But one way that it does fit the trend is that this narrator, Edie, is very disconnected from herself and her body. And something that I noticed is that I had to look up the name of the main character. She is named, her name is Edie, but I forgot that because hardly anyone ever says her name. I'd be interested to see like how many times it appears, like once maybe? Twice? And I think that was an intentional decision, probably having to do with her isolation and alienation and that people don't really see her. I mean, she doesn't have friends or family, and the people in her life are these toxic people who are using her, and so yeah, she doesn't get to hear her own name very often, which is really sad. But I think that just really points to subtle stuff that's going on. I think if I read this a second time, I would notice some patterns that I didn't notice the first time. I think this is, you know, the kind of book that warrants a second reading because I didn't really notice that right away. All in all, I think this is a really great book. I'm super excited that it's a debut. I think Raven Leilani knows what she's doing, and I think if I read this a second time, I would get even more out of it. So I do recommend it to you, but only if you like the writing style. So that's all for now. Please subscribe if you like this video. Videos come out every Thursday, and I also have a Patreon and ways you can give me money linked in the description below. So thank you. Bye.